Vampires are a powerful and feared type of undead that survive by feeding on blood, showing no mercy or compassion. Generally, a vampire maintains the appearance they had in life, but their skin becomes pale and their features grow sharper and more predatory. Their eye color changes to an unforgettable shade of red, and their hands have sharp, glassy claws. Vampires also possess retractable, sharp fangs they use to bite into their victims. When well fed, a vampire's body stops decomposing and temporarily regenerates, giving them a pinker complexion and briefly restarting their circulation. Some vampires even hide their undead appearance by using makeup. They cast no shadows, have no reflections in mirrors, and move completely silently. Some scholars believe that vampires retain their souls after their transformation. In their undead existence, they indulge in luxury and excess, often sharing these tendencies with liches. They are inherently evil creatures. Even if they are not evil in life, the transformation into undeath twists them. Their past achievements and affections become dark and corrupted. Love turns into obsession, and friendship morphs into jealousy. Many vampires become fixated on desires from their mortal lives. Those who once sought love become hunters, preying on beauty, while other fixations often extend to material possessions, with vampires collecting art, horrifying instruments of torture, or filling their lairs with morbid trophies. Being cunning and patient, vampires craft their plans with great care, advancing them slowly, sometimes taking decades to act. With no fear of time, they easily outlast their mortal foes, spending years or even centuries plotting revenge. A vampire retains all the abilities they had in life, along with new powers such as draining blood and life energy, and the ability to control others through their gaze. They can command creatures like rats, bats, and wolves, and even transform into them. Vampires also have the ability to shift into a gaseous form at will, and when their physical bodies die, they turn into a gas to retreat into their coffin and heal. They can walk on any surface as if under a spider climb spell. As undead, vampires exist both in the physical world and the negative energy plane. They are immune to spells like sleep, charm, and hold, and they are highly resistant to non-magical damage from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing attacks. They are barely affected by necrotic magic, resistant to cold and lightning, and completely immune to psionics and paralysis. Their regeneration is powerful, although holy water or radiant magic can stop the healing. Vampires have heightened senses, including dark vision, exceptional hearing, and an extraordinary sense of smell, far beyond that of a living person. Their most significant vulnerability is their extreme sensitivity to sunlight. Direct exposure causes them immediate pain, and if they remain in the sun for too long, they will eventually burn to ashes unless they find shelter in the shadows. Vampires also cannot remain in running water for more than a moment without being harmed. They are permanently connected to their coffins and the soil corrupted by their burial. While resting or regenerating in their coffin, they can be destroyed instantly by driving a stake through their undead heart. They also have an aversion to garlic, avoiding any place where its presence is strong. Vampires cannot enter a residence unless they receive an explicit invitation from its inhabitants. In combat, they are formidable fighters, relying on their immense strength to strike, tear, and bite. Their unarmed attacks are as powerful as magical weapons. They make use of their ability to dominate opponents' minds and employ all the combat skills they have in life. A vampire's bite drains the blood of their enemies, and they can summon swarms of vermin to aid them in battle. Typically, they seek to increase their power by creating spawn, undead creatures subservient to them who will also prey on the living. However, these spawn are unable to spread vampirism unless their master allows them to drink their blood, transforming them into full vampires. Few vampires are willing to grant this power, as it means relinquishing control over their thralls. When a vampire master dies, their spawn are freed and gain their will back. Some vampires have served powerful figures like Hezass Nemar, the lich who commands undead armies with vampire generals leading them. However, most vampires prefer to act alone. When gathered in groups, they are often led by a vampire lord. Beyond the prime material plane, vampires can be found in other realms. On the Thanatos layer of the Abyss, they serve the drow deity Kieran Sali as advisors of the City of the Dead. More powerful vampire lords maintain shrines on the plane of Pandemonium. Vampires are also a familiar presence in the negative energy plane in the Shadowfell, where they have established baronies and rule over local inhabitants. Some vampires choose imposing, defensible locations for their lairs, often favoring castles, mansions, or other fortified buildings. They are particularly drawn to places marked by tragedy, such as the sites of suicide or murder. Their most prized possession, the coffin containing their burial soil, is typically hidden underground or in a vault protected by traps and guards. The lairs of especially powerful vampires corrupt the surrounding land, attracting large numbers of vermin, causing plant life to wither into brambles within a wide area and covering the territory in dense fog. The shadows in these areas grow unnaturally long and twisted, giving the impression that they move on their own. This corruption fades within days after the vampire's destruction. Vampires, like other undead, are unnatural creatures that exist only to spread evil. They do not need to eat, breathe, or sleep except when they rest in their coffins. When feeding, vampires often strike quickly, draining blood from their victims but leaving them alive. However, when hunting to kill, they ensure their prey's bodies are destroyed to prevent them from rising as undead. Their malevolent presence is so powerful that it can be sensed by certain animals, such as dogs. Vampire dust, obtained from defeating a vampire, is a crucial spell component in Faerun. It is required for casting spells like Gaseous Form, Skull Trap, Death Shroud, and Energy Drain. Vampire blood is utilized in spellcasting, specifically in Ensoul's Soul Theft, by using a droplet of their blood. Furthermore, vampire ichor is needed for casting the Deathbolt spell, and fragments of vampire bone are essential for higher levels of undead summoning. In alchemy, vampire dust also has similar uses. It's an essential ingredient for concocting potions of gaseous form and potions of human control. Vampire blood can also be mixed with other monstrous fluids, like those of trolls, granting regenerative abilities to humanoids. Such a process was known to have been applied to Coven Brenzan of Raven's Bluff after necromantic rituals performed by the Sentish wizard Disklai. Beyond spell components, vampire blood is valuable for those seeking to undergo the Draco Lich transformation. Aspirants of lichdom must also collect vampire blood or blood from a person affected by vampirism as part of several ingredients needed to prepare a special potion that conditions their body for transformation. One legend claims that the demon prince Orcus is responsible for creating the first vampires, mimicking the blood fiends. Another tale suggests that when a vampire is destroyed, their soul transforms into a crimson death, also called a vampiric mist. In one version of the legend, this transformation occurs if a vampire is unable to return to their burial grounds for restoration. A different story proposes that when a vampire is created, a crimson death counterpart also comes into existence, and if the two ever reunite, the vampire can be restored to life. Another myth revolves around the Gulthias tree, which was said to be accidentally created by the vampire Gulthias. A bloodied stake, used to kill the vampire, sprouted tendrils, and eventually grew into the first Gulthias tree. Some people believed that enchanted arrows of vampires were crafted from actual vampire teeth, although this is likely false given the large number of such arrows found throughout the realms. A more primitive belief is that if someone sees no reflection in a mirror, it means their soul has already left their body, which could explain why vampires cast no reflection. There are several distinct varieties of vampire. Corpse vampires, called pouncing vampires by halflings, appeared in the realms after the spell plague. A humanoid corpse can become one of these creatures if improperly buried and placed in an area tainted by evil or robbed of its burial items. These vampires have pale, decaying skin and a wild appearance. They move slowly but are quick when pouncing. Retaining memories of their previous life, they often target former friends and relatives. Like other vampires, corpse vampires are immune to diseases and poisons, have dark vision, and feed on blood. Any humanoid drained by them rises as a corpse vampire at the next sunset, while those killed by other means become zombies. These transformations can be avoided by revival, burning, or decapitation. Besides using their fangs, they also fight with sharp claws, and often attack from high ground by leaping onto their prey. Unlike some vampires, they don't rest in coffins during the day, but they burrow into loose soil. In the Shadowfell, they can be found in Evernight in the burning woods, reflections of Neverwinter and the surrounding forests. They speak in harsh tones, often using the common tongue, and hunt with other undead or nocturnal creatures. Dhampyrs are living creatures who have inherited some of the tainted blood of vampires. Some Dhampyrs are descendants of male vampires and mortal females, while others may be born to two Dhampyr parents or result from a vampire biting a pregnant female. Physically, Dhampyrs are thin and willowy, with pale skin and slightly pointed ears. They have pronounced canines and blood-red eyes that seem unharmed by sunlight or positive energy. Many Dhampyrs also experience the characteristic bloodlust of vampires, although their thirst is much milder than that of a true vampire. In addition to their shared ability to drain blood, some of them develop unnatural abilities such as quick movement, enhanced night vision, and the power to transform into a mist for short periods. More advanced abilities may allow them to charm enemies or gain vitality from drinking blood. The time it takes for vampiric abilities to awaken in Dhampyrs varies greatly from one person to another. In some cases, these abilities skip generations before awakening in later descendants, while others may experience their heritage early on in life. Despite their unique circumstances, as half-breeds and the spawn of the undead, most Dhampyrs possess standard mortal physical characteristics and abilities. However, they often exhibit a mix of traits from both sides of their heritage, including patience, black humor, and an affinity for death and macabre practices. The degree to which Dhampyrs feel outcast depends on many factors, such as where they were raised and whether or not they are aware of their vampiric blood. Those who can pass as normal may be more accepted by society, while those with a known heritage often face mistreatment or discrimination. They occupy a unique position in both mortal and vampire societies. They can be valued for their strengths, but also discriminated against due to their mixed nature. Some Dhampyrs are born into mortal society, where they pass as normal if their true nature is unknown. Others are raised by vampires and treated as special members of their clan. As a result, some view their heritage as a curse, turning them into dead stalkers who hunt down vampires to make up for their own perceived shortcomings. Others see it as a blessing, using their supernatural abilities to become blood knights and deadly warriors. Eastern vampires are distinct from their Western counterparts, possessing the ability to turn invisible at will but lacking the power to transform into mist or charm victims. Eastern vampires typically reside near nomadic settlements on the steppes of high meadows and horde lands. The only recorded historical account of an Eastern vampire that is known in Faerun is that of Shi-Chu. Shi-Chu is a powerful Eastern vampire who ruled over the Taring village of Gigit in Sholung around the year 1358. His reign came to an abrupt end when he was attacked by hunters from Tebing and struck with a wooden stake before being thrown into the Ular River. After washing ashore, Shi-Chu recovered from his injuries by draining the blood of 2 hunters who found him. He then set out to reclaim control of his village, which had been taken over by the monk Awang Sofir during his absence. Shi-Chu encountered an adventuring party hired by the emperor to find General Goyat Nagumo and offered them safe passage to the area in exchange for their help reconquering his village. If they refused, he threatened to kill them indiscriminately. Despite facing opposition from the new ruler, who escaped using his ring of teleportation, Shi-Chu managed to regain control of the village and resume his rule. Jikki-Ketsu Gaki are malevolent spirits native to Kara-Tur, recognized as the most intelligent and powerful among the Gaki. These creatures have a frightening appearance, resembling gaunt humanoids with dark, oily skin. Their features include yellow fangs, short but sharp claws, and deep-set eyes. In combat, they are ruthless fighters. They attack swiftly and without hesitation, using their claws and teeth to inflict lethal damage. Their primary goal is to drain the blood of their victims, and once they manage to bite someone, they hold on tightly until either they or the target is dead. Jikki-Ketsu Gaki have a unique method of paralyzing their victims using a special biwa. When they encounter potential targets, they begin playing this instrument while remaining invisible. The eerie melody will paralyze someone. After finishing their song, they will tighten the biwa strings one by one until they snap, causing damage to the paralyzed victim with each string that breaks. Once all the strings are snapped, they become visible and launch a physical attack. The victims remain paralyzed until struck by the creature. These spirits possess several other abilities. Like other Gaki, they can become invisible and polymorph at will. They can use Pass Wall 3 times a day. They are immune to Charm, Cold, Fire, Hold, and Sleep spells, as well as the Drowsy Insect spell. However, they are susceptible to any spells that target spirits. In addition, they can slowly regenerate damage inflicted upon them. They are typically solitary beings preferring to operate alone. They are not known to keep permanent homes, constantly moving from place to place in search of food. They are frequently found in abandoned sacred sites, such as shrines and temples and cemeteries. They are said to be the spirits of priests who committed heresy, punished by being reborn as Gaki due to their evil actions during their lifetime. A local legend from Aru province mentioned a particularly powerful spirit residing in the nearby Ikuyu Mountains. This creature was believed to possess prophetic abilities and would leave a disturbing omen during times of impending trouble, the body of a wise man slain with his spear. A Penanggalan is a type of vampiric undead creature, specifically a female, that originated in eastern Faerun. By day, it appears as a regular human woman, closely resembling how they look before undeath. However, at night, their head detaches from their body, revealing a long tail approximately 3 feet in length. The detached head, with glowing red eyes, searches for prey under the cover of darkness. When hunting, the Penanggalan targets sleeping women. Males are chosen only if no suitable female victims are available. After finding a victim, they hypnotize them, puncture their neck, and feed on their blood throughout the night. This process repeats night after night until the victim dies. Even if the Penanggalan does not return for more blood, the victim is left cursed and will die within weeks unless specific healing and dispelling magic is used. Victims have no clear memory of the attacks, only faint recollections of red water and piles of corpses. Women who die from the feeding rise once again as these creatures, but men do not undergo the transformation. In its human form, the Penanggalan retains all their combat abilities they had in life, but are unable to create new undead. When their head is attached, the body remains immobile, although the Penanggalan can still sense creatures around it. In such cases, they will attack if any of these creatures are awake, which is rare. Exposure to sunlight has a significant effect on their head, causing paralysis until the sunlight disappears. If the head stays detached from the body for more than 7 hours after exposure to the sun, both parts will begin to decay, and the force animating the creature returns to the 9 hells. Destroying the body while the head is detached can lead to the Penanggalan's death within a few days. Witnessing the head separate from the body causes most creatures to fall unconscious for around a day, after which they wander in a daze. Those who see the head flying and uttering eerie cryptic threats often experience overwhelming terror. Typically, Penanggalans lead a solitary existence, maintaining around 6 layers at a time. Some are also known to dwell beyond the material plane, in places such as the domains of dread. They are known occasionally to serve deities like Kiran Sali. The Nosferatu are a type of vampire with unique characteristics and abilities. They have pale gray skin that feels cold to the touch, gaunt faces, and eyes that glow with an otherworldly light. Some Nosferatu may appear flushed and warm after feeding for several hours, while others may possess fierce claws or be unable to cast shadows. In terms of intelligence, some are highly intelligent and capable of mastering languages over time, while others are semi-intelligent and prone towards savage behavior. Those with lower intellects can become lucid after a blood meal. Most Nosferatu share common vampire abilities such as spider climbing and shape-shifting, but they lack the energy-draining touch that other vampires possess. Instead, some have unique powers, including telepathy that allows them to charm and command those they've bitten. Despite their formidable abilities, they are vulnerable to certain weaknesses shared with other vampires. They can be harmed by silver and running water, or fall into a death-like coma at sunrise. Some may also be weakened by direct sunlight, but exposure to moonlight can grant them regenerative powers. In combat, some of them fight using claws or magical weaponry like rapiers, while others use spells to defend themselves. It is said that only the weak and charmed are targeted by these vampires. The history of the Nosferatu dates back to around 1371, when an evil mage named Kimber attracted the attention of the dark powers in Ravenloft. A drow vampire brought a Nosferatu through from Toril. Jandar Sunstar, a gold elf vampire and one of the foremost experts on vampires on Toril, is a Nosferatu variant. In terms of their social structure and habits, Nosferatus are typically solitary beings active at night, often found alone or in small groups with other Nosferatu or vampire spawn. They inhabit places avoided by the living due to being filthy or difficult to access, such as caves and ruins. Each Nosferatu has multiple layers with coffins, requiring sleep for around 8 hours to remain healthy. Unlike common vampires, they require a specific type of soil from their original grave in each coffin to rest. This resting period is necessary to restore their powers disabled by sunlight exposure. Nosferatu have an intense dependence on blood and grow hungrier over time, bordering on an addiction. If deprived of food for too long, they become frenzied upon any viable victim that comes within their range. Velaya are aquatic vampire creatures that were once surface-dwelling or underwater humanoids affected by an ancient undead curse. They appear as blue-skinned humanoids with gills on their necks and clawed appendages, looking quite feral with tangles in their hair, wild eyes, and ripped, ragged clothing. They possess shape-shifting abilities, allowing them to transform into great white sharks, manta rays, or a moving current of water. When they suffer enough damage, they transform into their water form and travel back to their lairs to recover and heal for around a day. In humanoid shape, they can perform charming songs that affect creatures, which possesses a similar effect to a charm spell. They are immune themselves to sleep, charm, hold magics, and resistant to cold and electricity. They can only be harmed by magic weapons and rapidly heal unless exposed to their main weakness, daylight. It's difficult to destroy them, but they can be destroyed by open air, a wooden stake through the heart while resting in their crypts, or via the Disintegrate spell. They are vicious predators who feed on the blood of living creatures. When battling in one of its beast forms, it attacks with bites akin to natural animals. In water current shape, they are only vulnerable to some spells and cannot attack or be damaged. In blue-skinned human shape, they can sap life energies from their victims with a mere touch. They are solitary creatures that often accompany marine wights and can summon mako sharks to aid them when underwater. Creatures killed by Velaya turn into undead marine wights within 3 days after their death. To create another of their kind, the aquatic vampires must share their blood with the victim. They must rest in their deep dark underwater crypts during the day and often lair within ancient tombs, submerged cities, temples, and burial mounds swallowed by sea depths. If a consecrated holy symbol is deposited within their lair, they can never rest there again, even after the symbol is removed. A similar effect can be achieved by blessing the area. Each Velaya usually keeps several underwater lairs, sometimes forming temporary habitats within underwater caves and shipwrecks. Outside of Toril, they can be found stalking the seas of Mystara and the domains of Dread. Vampire Muses are stunningly beautiful and Eladrin-like in appearance, barely distinguishable from a living creature. They originate from the Feywild and are renowned for stimulating creativity in artists. These vampires can dominate other creatures with their gaze, charm undominated creatures to move away by means of a mere song, and psychically impede a creature's movement with their touch. They can teleport short distances due to their Fey origins. Each vampire muse keeps an ornate cauldron filled with blood in their hidden lair that acts as the ultimate source of their power. This cauldron functions similarly to a witch's phylactery, restoring the vampire muse to undeath 30 days after their body crumbles to dust from being killed. The only way to permanently eliminate one is to find and destroy their cauldron. Vampire muses are quite elusive in combat and willing to take risks due to their near indestructibility. They typically use their fey nature to teleport close to a foe, then dominate them with their gaze. They charm other foes away with their song, while having the dominated target intercept those unaffected. Like most vampires, they are sanguinivores and slowly steal blood from the artists they inspire creativity in. They store a great deal of this blood in their ornate cauldrons. Vampire muses are native to the Feywild, but can also be found in the city of Evernight on the plain of Shadowfell, which is the reflection of Neverwinter. These vampires truly value the relationships they develop with mortals who inspire creativity through art. However, these mortals will likely soon die afterward, becoming a gaunt, hollow-eyed husk. They are often accompanied by living creatures who serve them in hopes of being chosen as companions. Vampire spawn are undead beings created by vampires. In appearance, they retain the form they had in life, although their features take on a more hardened and predatory look. A vampire spawn is naturally subservient to the vampire that created it. They only regain their free will if their creator dies or willingly grants them freedom. Once a spawn is freed, it cannot be enslaved again. Despite their subservient nature, they tend to view themselves as superior to both living and undead beings, regardless of the true power of those beings. Some freed vampire spawn are known to take on a life of adventuring, to seek vengeance on their creators, or seek redemption for their cursed existence. If they can control their intense emotions, they may pursue knowledge, glory, or power. Their overwhelming pride drives them as they continue to believe they are better than others. They do not possess all the abilities of a true vampire, but they still suffer from all the traditional weaknesses and vulnerabilities. In combat, they excel in stealth and manipulative charm, easily holding their own against opponents. If brute strength is not enough, they rely on abilities like turning into gaseous form or climbing walls like a spider to evade defeat. Their bite and touch can drain blood and dominate their enemies, making them formidable adversaries, especially for the living. Much like other intelligent undead, vampire spawn rarely involve themselves with any religion. They are commonly found in the Rauven Vale and Sundabar Vale regions of the Silver Marches. In the demiplane of Dread, the vampire Strahd von Zarovich commands many vampire spawn, some of whom serve in his castle or remain hidden in settlements throughout Barovia. Many of these spawn were once his consorts. Vampire spawn are known not only to serve true vampires, but also other powerful undead beings, such as Atropals and Skull Lords. When acting independently, they often gather other undead creatures like ghouls and wights as soldiers, or employ mummies and morgues as bodyguards. Dryder vampires are undead driders infected with vampirism. They retain much of their original appearance, but with notable changes, such as clawed hands and venomous fangs that extend from their mouths. They possess a blend of powers from both driders and regular vampires. Like typical vampires, they drain blood, but their bite is far more lethal. Unlike common vampires, they don't need to grapple their victims to drain them. A single bite is enough to begin the process. Once they latch on after a successful bite, they can immediately drain the target's blood. However, this does leave them exposed to other attacks, as they are unable to dodge while attached. Their claws have a unique power. When they strike a victim, they drain not only blood, but also the victim's life force. This stolen energy allows the Dryder vampire to heal more quickly, making them even harder to defeat. They can exert mental control over spider-like creatures. While this compulsion works effectively on less intelligent spider kind, more intelligent ones can resist the commands. They also have the ability to transform into a spider of equal or smaller size, and maintain the form until the next sunrise. In terms of their personalities, they are filled with an intense hatred for all living beings, driven by their undead nature. Socially, they are often outcasts. Their status as both driders and vampires leave them isolated, and they typically live solitary lives. Jorgani was a female dryder and cleric devoted to Kiaran Sali, living in the city of Mer Madeira. She had a distinctive appearance, with her legs tangled in sticky webs and glowing eyes, giving her an eerie presence. After failing the test of Lolth, Jorgani embraced the vengeful ways of Kiaran Sali, becoming bitter and full of hatred. She took great pleasure in creating spider-like creatures and spreading her vampiric curse to other driders. Confident and fearless in battle, she believed few could locate or breach her hidden lair. She especially enjoyed capturing weak enemies, delighting in trapping them and draining their blood. She exhibited all the formidable abilities of typical Dryder vampires, but also had exceptional insight and a powerful personality that allowed her to ascend to a prominent role within the Church of Kiaran Sali. As a cleric, her skills were significantly enhanced by her transformation into a Dryder and her embrace of vampirism after converting. She was proficient in spellcasting, capable of casting powerful spells like Control Undead, Destruction, and Repulsion even during combat. She was well prepared for confrontations, often surrounding herself with strong wards and empowered allies. She had developed a method for creating arachnoid creatures capable of twisting beings into strange spider-like monsters over time. In her youth, she had been trained as a drow cleric of Lolth and had risen through the ranks until she was deemed ready to face the test. Her failure led to her transformation into a Dryder, deepening her bitterness toward the deity who had judged her unworthy. By the year 1372, she had become a significant figure within the cult. Following the coup of the House of Chumva in the city, she settled in Castle Maramidra, where she was free to create her arachnoid monsters as she pleased. A vampiric dragon is a dragon afflicted with vampirism. It is formed when another vampiric dragon completely drains the life force of a living one. Driven by a desire for evil and death, vampiric dragons often spread rumors about their treasure to lure adventurers in, using them as a source of sustenance. These creatures possess the ability to create vampire spawn by draining their victim's blood or life energy. If the victim is an adult dragon, it reanimates as another vampiric dragon in a few days. Younger dragons instead become zombie-like and lack intelligence. They share many similarities with non-draconic vampires, feeding on the blood of living beings, lacking shadows and reflections, and having the ability to turn into mist. While ordinary vampires are tied to coffins, vampiric dragons are bound to their hoards. Sunlight weakens and slows them, and prolonged exposure can destroy them. They can be killed by a stake through the heart, although due to their massive size, this requires something like a wooden spear. Vampiric dragons are not affected by running water, garlic, or mirrors, and although they cannot enter homes without invitation, they can simply destroy the structure and sift through the remains for victims or treasure. Vampyres are a rare strain of vampirism found in Faerun. Due to their unique abilities, they often have ash-colored clothing and burnt hair. Their hands are always full of fire, as if a flame had been cast, although unlike the spell, their possessions are liable to combust. This forces them to use their bat form whenever they need to interact with things without the threat of igniting them. They can also transfer some of their life energy to other undead or living creatures by means of a breath, usually in the form of a kiss, effectively healing or revitalizing them. Only enchanted weaponry can harm them. They are impervious to harm from fire and resistant to damage from cold and electrical magic. Like other vampires, they can be harmed with holy water and symbols. When engaging in prey, they usually set their enemy's clothes alight and then attack them while the enemy scrambles to put out the flames. They typically lair within structures made of stone that have been burnt bare. A vampire named Spadira Omrakant is currently lairing within the Sargauth level of Undermountain, although not much is known about them. The Rite of Profane Ascension is an ancient and malevolent ritual that enables a vampiric being to enhance its abilities while removing all of its weaknesses, such as sensitivity to sunlight. The ritual involves chanting in the infernal language and the sacrifice of 7,000 souls. Once completed, the individual leading the ritual becomes the vampire ascendant. In this new state, they are no longer subject to the usual afflictions of vampires, and all of the powers they possessed as a vampire become significantly stronger. The origins of the rite remain unknown and lost to the ages. By 1492, the only being aware of the ritual's detail is the archdevil Mephistopheles. As of the 13th century, he made a deal with the vampire lord Cazador Sar, who is the only vampire known by name to have attempted performing this ritual. As immortal beings of great power, there have been numerous influential historical vampires throughout the history of Toril. The origins of vampirism on Toril and who the first vampire was are a mystery. The first significant vampire in the historical record is King Orlak of Westgate. Orlak, known as the Night King, was a powerful vampire who ruled over Westgate in the 3rd and 2nd centuries before the Dale Reckoning. He was born in the year of Chilled Marrow, -343, and became a vampire in the year of Vampiric Glee, -317. His reign began when he led an elite mercenary army out of Westgate's catacombs in the year of Foul Awakenings. Over the course of the night, they overwhelmed the city's defenders and massacred King Thorndayer of the Golden Helm and his entire family. By morning, Orlak had seized power over Westgate as its new king. Orlak's rule was marked by terror, and he used dark magic to create a special chalice known as the Agral of Orlak from a chunk of bone taken from the skeleton of a topaz dragon. He also crafted the flying fangs of the Night King. For over a century, he ruled Westgate until he was finally defeated by a company of adventuring paladins led by Dawn Knight Soleilon in the year of Blooded Sunsets. With Orlak's destruction, his reign came to an end, and the paladin was crowned the next king. The vampires once loyal to Orlak retreated into the sewers and Undercity, where they dominated the city's crime syndicates organized around a chief vampire known as the Night King. Orlak himself was known to wear a porcelain mask with a black and white hatched pattern that concealed his face except for his eyes. He never held court during daylight hours, but instead ruled after sunset. The line of the Night Kings in Westgate have continued into the 14th century. Ajax was a greater vampiric Ixizchital who ruled the Zedran Reefs from 885, the year of the Thistle, until 985, the year of Bright Nights. Upon being crowned, he established a new society within the Zedran Reefs. One of the core traditions of this society was a vampire of their kind would rule for a period of 100 years. If a ruler failed to vanquish all their enemies within that time, they were considered untrustworthy in the eyes of their deity. At the end of their rule, the leader is required to bite and transform their chosen successor into a new vampiric vitinar, ensuring the continuity of the tradition and political structure. Nyrisa Flas, known as the vampire Zulkir, held the title of Zulkir of Necromancy among the Red Wizards of Thay during the 12th century. She was a member of the noble Flas family and served in this powerful role until 1157, the year of the Wizened Mage. That year, Zastam, a fellow Red Wizard, led a group of his peers in a mission to eliminate her. According to Red Wizard tradition, a Zulkir can only be removed from power if there is no chance of resurrection or return as an undead, meaning Nerissa had to be completely destroyed. To ensure her permanent death, she was slain with an oaken stake through the heart, followed by a barrage of fireballs. Following her destruction, Zastam took her place as Zulkir of Necromancy. By the mid to late 14th century, her death remains a well-known example among the Red Wizards, illustrating the importance of thoroughly destroying a Zulkir before they can be replaced. Hezass Nemar was the Tharkion of Larpendar in Thay and held the title of Eternal Flame at the Temple of Kossuth in Escalante. He was known for his corruption, often plundering the offerings given to Kossuth by the faithful. Despite his high-ranking position, he was looked down upon within the church, with many believing that the Fire Lord would eventually expel him from the clergy. His favorite guards were 4 golems made of a deep brown Thayan oak, carved to resemble men-at-arms. Nemar owed much of his power to the Lich Zastam, who helped him secure his position as both the Eternal Flame and Tharkion. This ensured Nemar's loyalty. However, in 1475, when Tom discovered Nemar stealing a platinum tiara from the temple, he chose to bind Nemar further into his service rather than turning him over to his superiors. During the civil war in Thay between Zastam and the Council of Zulkirs from 1375 to 1385, Nemar repeatedly switched sides, earning a reputation for being faithless and unreliable. His primary concern was his own survival, maneuvering for power and wealth amid the conflict between the wizards. However, when it became clear that Tom was turning Thay into a realm dominated by the undead, Nemar once again sided with the Council of Zulkirs and joined their forces in the Battle of the Keep of Sorrows. As a result of his wavering loyalties, Tom sent one of his subordinates to turn him into a vampire, binding him back to his cause. Nemar was known to wear a scarf to conceal the bite marks on his neck from his vampiric transformation. During the Battle at the Keep of Sorrows, the spell plague struck, and Nemar was engulfed in blue fire. Its effects left him frozen in a state of cloudy crystal, effectively turning him into a living statue. His fate, at present trapped in this form, is currently unknown. Dragomir the Red was a vampire warlord who sought power relentlessly, both in life and after becoming undead. He commanded his armies with an iron grip, inspiring both admiration and fear among his followers. After being turned into a vampire, Dragomir commissioned a magical cloak from the necromancer Zulon Floss. This cloak granted him the ability to move freely during the daylight, a rarity among his kind. He kept his coffin inside a special bag of holding, which he entrusted to his most loyal knight. This precaution ensured that if he was ever slain in battle, he could continue his existence. Dragomir was known for fighting on the front lines of the military campaigns he led, rarely shying away from direct combat. His presence in battle was both feared and respected, further cementing his authority over those he led. For a long time, his followers remained loyal to him, but they realized eventually that his insatiable hunger for power would ultimately lead to their downfall. Fearing the consequences of his ambitions, some of his most trusted devotees secretly commissioned the creation of the Cask of Imprisonment, a crown designed to stun and immobilize its wearer. They used it to subdue Dragomir and interred him within a crypt beneath the graveyard of Atkatla, where he remained trapped for many years. Sometime during the 12th century, a thief named Hexot was hired by her patron to recover the cask, but when Hexot removed the cask from Dragomir's head, he awoke and in turn transformed her into a vampire. After turning her, Dragomir imprisoned Hexot in a nearby stone coffin, where she remained for 2 centuries. In 1369, a hero from Baldur's Gate, along with a woman named Clara, were tasked with entering Dragomir's tomb. Both were manipulated into confronting him, ultimately defeating the vampire once and for all, and freeing Hexot from her long imprisonment. Rayana was a tall, striking woman with tousled red hair and green eyes. While posing as a human, she displayed a cheerful and flirtatious demeanor, often acting kind to those around her. However, when she chose to hunt, her behavior shifted dramatically, becoming cold, predatory, and completely without mercy toward her victims. She wielded a longsword, a skill she had mastered in her life as a fighter. In 1369, she and her companion briefly ran the Journey's Rest Inn, located near Hulltail. Their intention was to prey on unsuspecting travelers, specifically targeting those who would not be missed. They killed the previous owners, a married couple and their 2 workers who had recently renovated the inn and took over the establishment. They hired 2 barmaids, Maris and Cora, to help with their operations while they lay in wait for their next victims. Their first planned victim was a necromancer named Ratakos, who turned the tables on them. Instead of falling prey, he overpowered them and proposed a new arrangement. He would raise undead creatures to attack travelers, forcing them to seek refuge at the inn. Once inside, the vampires could drain the travelers, after which Ratakos would take the bodies for his necromantic experiments. However, their plan unraveled quickly. A merchant named Portus fled the inn after sensing danger. Soon after, they encountered a more difficult prey, Lord Rin Mornsall and Alanis Dirgesong, who were too important to kill without risking exposure. Due to these events, they were considering leaving the inn and abandoning the plan altogether. Saeed was a vampire and prominent leader among the beast chieftains of Veldorn, holding this position from the 11th to 15th centuries. He had a somber and melancholic personality, often dwelling on the loss of his former wealth. The only time he found peace was when he used his powers to mediate disputes among the beast chieftains. Occasionally he would steal from the caravans of the Shining South that passed through Veldorn. Despite this, his main role was to mediate conflicts between his fellow chieftains, using both his abilities and psionic powers to maintain order. He was once a prominent member of Chaka Baroda and the wealthiest merchant in Torelve during the early 11th century. In accordance with Dorpari custom, his wealth led to his election as a Nawab. His power and influence grew, and he became increasingly reluctant to share his wealth with his fellow members. Secretly, he began searching for a way to achieve immortality, seeking out potions of longevity. In the year of Chevalier, 1048, A friendly visitor arrived at Saeed's court, offering immortality in exchange for an oath of loyalty to Shar. Saeed agreed, and the visitor took him to the ruins of Old Valen, where he was transformed into a vampire slave. Saeed returned to his city under the control of his master. When his fellow Chaka members discovered what had happened, they sent adventurers to eliminate the vampires. While they succeeded in killing Saeed's master, Saeed himself survived and fled. After his escape, Chaka Baroda spread the story of his disappearance and continued his rule. Saeed returned to Old Valen, where he settled. Over time, the surrounding beast chieftains recognized his diplomatic abilities, and he became a mediator for disputes across Veldorn. He also persuaded the other chieftains to form a mutual alliance to fend off any external invasion. By the 15th century, Saeed was manipulating hired adventurers to launch attacks into the Beastlands, eliminating any potential rivals and securing his influence. Azira Gloomdelve was a vampire who served as a key advisor to the mercenary Lord Dalagor in Skullport in 1370. Originally, she had been an adventurer, but her life changed when she was bitten by a vampire while resting in Skullport. Shortly after, her vampire was killed by his bride in revenge, leaving Azira free from his control. However, her freedom was short-lived when she came under the influence of Dalagor. He forced her into servitude by threatening her spellbook, a valuable asset for her. She lived in Dalagor's mansion, where she was only allowed to drain the blood of slaves and was forbidden from creating new vampires. In addition to her partnership with Dalagor, she had 2 male human vampires who served under her and expanded her influence within the circle. Bohdi was once an elf from Suldanes-Alar who became a vampire after her exile. Alongside her sibling, Jonalith Arenicus, she orchestrated a grand plan to steal the divine essence of the dead god Baal and take revenge on their former homeland. Their hatred for their elven community drove much of their actions, with Bohdi reveling in cruelty and torment, while Arenicus remained more calculated in his approach. As a vampire, she was exceptionally powerful, even more so when infused with the soul of the Baal spawn. Her physical abilities made her a terrifying opponent in battle, where she could drain the life force of her enemies with a single strike. Her possessions included a number of rare tomes on vampirism, such as Dea Vampire Bicomos, Conjure Ota Serventa, and the unabridged Vampyricus Omnibus, which detailed her undead nature and abilities. She led a vampiric thieves guild located in an underground lair beneath the grave district of Alcatla. Her guild frequently clashed with the Shadow Thieves, a well-known criminal syndicate in Om. During these conflicts, she abducted numerous individuals for use in Arenicus's experiments. She had a highly unhealthy relationship with Arenicus, sharing their desire for revenge and power. Within her guild, she commanded several vampire followers, including her trusted right hand, Cohenta Aglan, along with Antenos, Valen, and Meridath. These vampires in turn controlled a number of thralls, who were given degrading names like Chor and Fetch. When Arenicus was the greatest mage in the city of Suldanes-Alar, she pulled him into her growing thirst for power. Together they devised a plan to drain the Tree of Life of its magical essence in an attempt to achieve godhood. Their efforts were thwarted by the elves, and both Bohdi and Arenicus were cursed, stripped of their connection to the Seldarine, and exiled. To counteract the effects of her curse, Bohdi sought undeath, but becoming a vampire did not give her the eternal life she had hoped for. Despite this, she continued to aid Arenicus in his quest for revenge, targeting various individuals, including the Baal spawn Abdel Adrian and his half-sister Imoen. In 1368, they abducted them near Baldur's Gate and imprisoned them near Joaquin's Promenade in Afkadla. However, the Shadow Thieves' attack on Arenicus' dungeon provided an opportunity for Abdel and Imoen to escape. After the escape, both Arenicus and Imoen were captured by the Cowled Wizards and taken to Spellhold, a magical asylum. Bohdi eventually returned to her lair beneath the Grave District, taking possession of the Rin Lanthorn, a powerful artifact. However, her reign was soon challenged. Abdel, Imoen, and their companions launched an assault on her thieves guild, decimating her undead forces in the process. In their final confrontation, the group faced Bohdi herself. Weakened, Bohdi retreated to her coffin, but they drove a stake into her heart, permanently destroying her. With her death, Baal's divine essence, which had been transferred to her, was returned to Imoen. Shulgi was a vampire thief who lived in Unther during 1357. Originally a thief in Cormyr, he encountered a vampire while exploring a ruin and was turned into one himself. After some time, the adventuring group known as the Destroyers of Ghosts killed Shulgi's vampire master, freeing him from his control. Shulgi fled east and eventually settled in Mesemprar, where he posed as a retired businessman, but secretly continued his activities as a thief. Notably, he refused to drink human blood, opting instead to feed on livestock he had purchased. Shulgi worked slowly on organizing a thieves guild in Mesemprar, but due to the recent upheavals in Unther, he began contemplating a move to Jacinta. He was not known to be particularly evil, although he could be merciless if someone provoked him enough, in which cases he killed his victims slowly. He had a strong passion for thievery and never created another vampire, as he remembered the harsh treatment he had endured under his own master. Tamith Iltazyara was a Rashmi artisan who lived in Bezantur, Thay, during the mid-14th century. She was enslaved by the Red Wizards and transformed into a unique type of vampire by the Atropal Zingax. However, before her transformation, she had been the lover of the bard Bareris Anskuld. Originally, she was a beautiful young woman from the Rashmi underclass. Deeply in love with the bard, she allowed him to leave around 1369 to pursue his career. After the death of her mother, she took on the responsibility of raising her younger brother Rahl on her own. Her father Borovic fell into despair, and despite being a skilled potter, he squandered his money on gambling and drinking. Although Tamith was a talented potter herself, she hadn't worked long enough to be accepted into the local guild. In 1375, she was desperate to pay off a gambling debt her father owed to the White Raven gang and chose to sell herself into slavery. She was purchased along with many other slaves by the Red Wizards and taken to Zingax's undead manufactory in Delhimide. Instead of being used as fodder for his zombies, Zingax transformed her into a vampire and bound her to his will. From that moment, she was forced to serve him and his wizards. During a battle at the Keep of Thazar, Tamith encountered Bareris again and attempted to kill him. However, he defeated her, even going so far as to hack her to pieces to end her undead existence before fleeing. Despite this, she survived by shifting into her bat form and under her lord's control returned to him. Over time, under Zingax's instruction, Tamith honed her vampiric abilities, including mastering control of her bat form. Throughout the ensuing Thayan conflict, she remained enslaved to Zingax and the Lich Zas Tam. Tamith immediately became the captain of the Silent Company, a group of vampires she created over the years. While these vampires shared typical vampiric powers, they did not inherit the extraordinary abilities that set Tamith apart from the rest. When the spell plague struck during the battle at the Keep of Sorrows, the enchantments that had bound Tamith to the will of her undead masters were broken. Freed from Zingax's influence, she took the opportunity to escape. She sought out the Council of Zolkirs, offering to join their fight in pursuit of long-awaited vengeance. During a battle at Zingax's fortress, Tamith was severely wounded and nearly died. Bareris, in a desperate attempt to save her, healed her by offering his own blood. Tamith fought alongside Bareris in the various battles for the Zolkirs' cause. After their defeat at the Second Battle of Keep of Sorrows, she accompanied the Zolkirs to Bezantur. When Zas Tam's legions closed in, forcing the Zolkirs to abandon the city, Tamith fled with them aboard one of their ships, although her ability to participate in the battles was limited to those who fought on board. Her nemesis, Sagoth, also joined the fight during an ocean battle, determined to end her life. After a brief but intense fight, Sagoth managed to incapacitate her. Bareris, along with his friend Mir and his griffin Winddancer, intervened to protect her. They nearly defeated Sagoth, but in a final desperate move, he grabbed Tamith, and they both plunged through the railing into the sea. Immersed in water, Tamith's vampiric body was immobilized and slowly dissolved by the sea water. Bareris and Winddancer followed them into the water, continuing their attack on Sagoth until he was forced to teleport away. Despite Bareris' efforts to save her, he could not reach Tamith in time, and she was dissolved entirely by the seawater, leaving nothing behind. Asraf in Malik el-Haman was a highly respected member of the Moonstars in the year of the Tankard 1370. Despite being transformed into a vampire, he remained loyal to Helben Aronson for reasons that were never fully understood. Originally, Asraf served as a blood warrior in Manshaka before joining the Harpers as a deep cover agent. During Aronson's trial, Asraf sided with the Archmage and later became part of the Moonstars. At one point, he was attacked and bitten by a vampire, which turned him into one. However, even after his transformation, he continued to serve Helben faithfully, operating as his agent in the Vilhan Reach. Sastra Karanak was the vampire daughter of the ruler of Luthchek in Chisenta, who was transformed in 1357. Her transformation occurred when her brother, Nerus Karanak, locked her in a crypt for 9 days as part of a cruel joke. When she emerged as a vampire, Sastra concealed that fact from her own family and cleverly orchestrated the destruction of her vampire master. To maintain her secret, Sastra took charge of the city watch during the night, justifying it as an effort to improve their efficiency. Under this guise, she secretly killed individuals she framed as wizards, draining their blood in the process. However, her true nature was eventually discovered by her father, forcing her to flee to Luthchek. After her escape, Sastra traveled and eventually settled in El-Khazar, where she covertly seized power. She united the local bandits into a formidable army and seduced the kingdom's king. Eventually, she transformed him into a vampire as well. She is known to be active in the region to this day, attacking Jarl and Hold with her allies. During the day, she was known for her charitable deeds, delivering food, healing herbs, and small toys to the children of Lutchuk. However, at night, she used confiscated magical items to frame individuals as wizards, draining their blood after seizing them. Her personality shifted dramatically depending on her hunger. At times, she was sweet, innocent, and loving. In contrast, when her hunger took over, she became a savage and ruthless killer. Holzon was an ancient vampire who, alongside his partner Mordroka, once ruled over Skullcrag Keep in the Stormhorns of Cormyr. Long before the mid-14th century, the keep was eventually taken by the Crown, and the Purple Dragons established the Road Warden Guard there. Although they were driven out, both vampires survived and swore vengeance against those who had taken their domain. He was known to dress in opulent clothes and wear a black cloak, possessed a voice described as harsh and malevolent. His powers were those of a vampire of great age, giving him mastery over vermin and complete control over the vampires he created. He was heavily armed, wielding an enchanted longsword, a magic-banded mail, and defending himself with an enchanted shield and a ring of protection. By the early 1360s, Holzon and Mordroka had gathered enough power and influence among the monsters of the Stormhorns and the Tunlands. They controlled an army of vampires, including some who lay dormant in a mausoleum beneath Skullcrag Keep, and even enlisted the help of a powerful beholder in their quest to reclaim their former stronghold. Their plot to regain control of the keep began with the disappearance of the Virdran Starbrow son of the Road Warden. Vidraund was turned into Mordroka's vampire thrall and was commanded to lead a monstrous force to slay his mother. The plan nearly succeeded, but Vidraund lost most of the arms of the Road Warden, powerful artifacts tied to the keep, to the monsters he led. Only the horned helm of the Road Warden remained in his possession. Arlen's surviving children, aided by a group of caravan guards, mounted a defense of Skullcrag and managed to recover 2 of the 3 lost arms. In response, Mordroka and Holzon sent a vampire thrall named Karamish to kidnap Arlen's husband, Moradel. They attempted to exchange him for the recovered arms, but the plot was foiled by adventurers who had joined the keep's defense. In a final attempt to claim the arms, Vidraund appeared before his family and the defenders of the keep, falsely accusing the adventurers of killing his mother. His lie, however, was quickly uncovered, and Vidraund revealed his vampiric nature, attacking with an army of giant rats and mobats. He was defeated, but moments later, Mordroka and Holzon entered the keep's great hall. Mordroka used her magic to paralyze the defenders and reform Vidraund from mist into physical form, commanding him to wield the arms of the Road Warden. Just as they were preparing to kill the defenders, a cleric of Sune, Lunit Dufay, used the last of her strength to counter Mordroka's magic, freeing the defenders and pulling the arms away from the vampires. After a fierce battle, the defenders managed to repel the 2 vampires. Although they were driven out of Skullcrag Keep, they were not destroyed, and it remains unclear who assumed the mantle of Road Warden. It is considered likely, however, that Holzon and Mordroka will return one day to menace Skullcrag Keep once again. Dragon Goldar was a Daywalker vampire and minor member of the Night Masters, the vampire-led group that controls the Night Mask Syndicate in Westgate. He was known for his striking appearance, with a strong jaw, blue eyes, and long chestnut hair. His good looks often attracted attention in the city's brothels and dance halls, giving him a reputation for charm and excess. His physique was compared to that of the cleric of Sune, the goddess of beauty, further enhancing his allure. He was the heir to the noble house of Goldar in Westgate and the grandson of its patriarch, Dathgold Guldar. However, Dragon had little interest in the family business, preferring to indulge in a life of luxury and wild parties. His behavior eventually led to his expulsion from the city's most exclusive brothels, prompting him to host lavish gatherings of his own. At one such dinner, Dragon encountered the Duchess Dahlia Vamos, who decided to turn him into her vampire slave. Following the wishes of her lord, Dahlia used Dragon in an experiment, transforming him into a weak Daywalker vampire through a discovery she made in Gulfmere. This change allowed Dragon to survive briefly in sunlight, making it easy to hide his new nature from others. Using his newfound ability, Dragon began subtly manipulating his family while advancing the Night King's plans. He oversaw the guild's smuggling operations and used his parties as a convenient cover for meeting with his subordinates. Fulton Hammerwand was a vampire and also a member of the Night Masters. His appearance was unusual for a vampire lord, as his diet had transformed his once large physique into one of sagging flesh, with thin, patchy reddish-brown hair. By 1480, decades without feeding had left his body covered in lesions. In life, Fulton was a skilled fence and information dealer, operating under the guise of a luxury merchant. He developed a vast network of contacts from across the Heartlands trading information. During one of his visits to Westgate, he uncovered sensitive information about a lieutenant of the Night Masks, which led him to being pursued by Dahlia Vamos, the Duchess of Venom. However, his talent for gathering intelligence saved him, as he managed to contact the Night King himself. Impressed, the Night King spared him and turned him into a vampire, making him the second member of the Court of Night Masks. From that point, Fulton served as Orbach's spymaster, known as the Duke of Whispers, and by 1372, he primarily operated from Westgate, using his network of spies and informants to stay informed. However, he was later imprisoned by Manchun in the lair of the Night Masters for around a century. Slowly starving, Fulton was ultimately destroyed in 1480 by a group led by Elira Nathalan and Mirren Darkdance. Shintlara Alvrindar was a drow vampire and the matron of the House of Alvrindar. In 1370, she served on the ruling council of her city, maintaining her position with the favor of Lolth, the drow goddess. Despite fears among her rivals that she might form a vampire army, she managed to hold on to her power. However, she discovered that she could only create vampires from drow who had failed Lolth's test, but who had not yet been turned into Dryders. She kept this knowledge a closely guarded secret. In the late 14th century, a notable court case unfolded in the city of Raven's Bluff involving an employer that had hired sentient undead, including vampires. The city's zoning board, led by the magistrate Justin Valerius, refused to allow this employer to operate while employing the undead individuals. The employee argued that the refusal was discriminatory, but the city responded by stating that these employees were by nature evil, bloodthirsty beings that should not be permitted on the streets. Kirkon Rufo was a cleric of Denir based in the Edificant Library during the mid-14th century. He was a tall man with a thin frame, stringy black hair, and pale skin. His sharp black eyes and his posture, often leaning at an angle, made his appearance rather distinct. Rufo harbored jealousy towards a fellow devotee of Denir, Caterli Bonadus. His envy made him vulnerable to manipulation by a priest of Talona. The priest hypnotized Rufo as part of a plot to unleash the Chaos Curse in 1361, the Year of the Maidens. Under the curse's influence, Rufo was consumed by his hatred for Caterli and the desire for a woman he courted, resulting in violence. Eventually, Rufo was subdued and freed from the curse's control. Afterward, he became remorseful and sought redemption for his actions. He joined Caterli, Danica, and the elf prince Elbereth on a journey to Shilmista, which was under attack by Agrelon Ragnar, a powerful orc-ogre hybrid and an agent of Castle Trinity. Despite his efforts to make amends, Rufo again found himself manipulated, this time by the wizard Dorigen and her imp ally Druzil, both associated with Castle Trinity. Kirkin Rufo, increasingly consumed by his darker nature, fled Shilmista before the conflict concluded. Upon his return home, he accompanied Headmaster Avery to Cara Dune, but was once again manipulated, this time by Bogo Wrath, a wizard from Castle Trinity. Rufo's actions inadvertently led to Avery's death, marking his final fall toward darkness. As a punishment, Caterli branded Rufo's forehead with a symbol, a blown-out candle above a closed eye, permanently exiling him from their order. Isolated and without allies, Rufo encountered Druzil once again. The imp, no longer bound to Alabaster Bonadus following his death, persuaded Rufo to return to the Edican Library to retrieve the Chaos Curse. Hoping to rid himself of the brand, Rufo drank from a bottle containing the curse. Instead of salvation, the elixir killed him at the steps of the library. 3 days later, Rufo arose from the dead, transformed into a vampire. He quickly took control of the Edificant Library, turning many of the other priests into lesser vampires or zombies. When Danica returned to the library, Rufo tried to claim her as his queen. However, she evaded his control by using a meditative technique to slow her metabolism, making it appear as though she had died. When Caterli returned, it led to a final confrontation between him and his old rival, Rufo. The battle saw Rufo's dark powers, fueled by his vampiric transformation, pitted against Caterli's clerical abilities. As Rufo tried to flee in mist form, Ivan Bouldershoulder, a dwarf ally, captured him in a bellows and exposed him to sunlight outside of the library. Despite being bathed in sunlight, Rufo's power was so immense that he defiantly rejected Denir in front of Caterli. However, Caterli's divine strength, combined with the sun's light, ultimately destroyed Rufo, along with the desecrated library he had corrupted. Another significant event occurred in 1372 in the hamlet of Liam's Hold during the time of the Wailing Death in Neverwinter. Cyronius Dethic, a drow priest of Vayrun turned vampire, began haunting the village, preying on its residents at night. Trapped beneath the hamlet, Dethic sought to find a bride to drain and turn into a fellow vampire. This haunting was eventually stopped with the aid of the hero of Daggerford. Olgar the Undying was a vampire who resided on Olgar's Isle in the Pirate Isles. He became a vampire in western Unther before -600 and was later exiled to the island, where pirates eventually freed him. Deprived of blood, Olgar descended into madness. By 1370, Olgar roamed the island with his vampiric minions, preying on anyone who ventured there. His minions were bound by magic to the island, unable to leave. Members of the Twisted Rune approached Olgar, seeking to ally with him. They provided him with a steady stream of slaves in an effort to restore his sanity. In exchange for all of his gathered knowledge, the Twisted Rune promised Olgar the means to leave the island. Ulgar's ultimate goal was to rule Chisenta once he gained his freedom. Eliza Darsen was a human woman and vampire, serving as the Omnian ruler of Snowdown in the Moonshae Isles around 1479. After becoming a vampire in Om, she had a vision of being reborn as a queen of the Feywild. By researching and consulting sages who she later drained of their blood, she discovered information leading her to believe that the city of Carador housed a portal to the Feywild. She then sought a position of power in Om's colony of Snowdown. Only her most trusted allies knew of her secrets. Dion is a vampire necromancer who operated in Undermountain as of around 1479. During this time, he discovered a necromancer's laboratory filled with unusual necromantic devices. He swiftly began conducting experiments to develop a new type of undead, capturing numerous living beings in Undermountain to use in these tests. Through these experiments, he created many undead and managed to fully resurrect a creature. He also used a Speak with Dead spell on the skull of the clan Malarkin dwarf to uncover hidden tombs. The Dryde Inn began as a simple wayside inn positioned on a hilltop. Over time, it transformed into a fortified settlement composed of a variety of wooden towers and structures that have been repeatedly rebuilt. The buildings now cover the entire hill, which overlooks Wamford, a village situated across the Desserin River. The two settlements are connected by the Ironford Bridge, a long wooden structure wide enough for a single wagon. It serves as a hub for trade, particularly in livestock and associated crafts. Its grounds are filled with stables, inns, warehouses, and tradesmen such as blacksmiths, wheelwrights, and wagon makers. Two concentric rings of high walls enclose the area, with gates that remain locked from sunset to sunrise. Those wishing to enter or exit during these hours must pay a significant fee to be raised or lowered on a chair by rope, taking only what they can carry. In recent years, the inn has fallen under the influence of the Centaurum, a shadowy network. Its members and allies are discreetly welcomed and given a discount. The settlement is governed by a group of business owners, many of whom are aligned with the Centaurum. Chalaska Muruwin, known as the Senior Sword, unofficially leads the group and oversees the militia. One of the inn's few permanent residents is Arik Stillmarsh, a reclusive and pale individual who is rumored to have deceived notable Waterhavian families. The Centaurum provide him shelter, although in reality Stillmarsh is a vampire. Occasionally called upon by Nalak Sur to eliminate troublesome individuals, Stillmarsh has an agreement with the Centaurum to avoid preying on locals or guests without their consent. To satisfy his hunger, he often targets rural travelers and impoverished individuals from Wamford, where he is known as the Wamford Bat. Stillmarsh's coffin, filled with earth, is hidden in the attic above his room in the Old Dryde, accessed through a secret door in a closet ceiling which can only be detected with careful observation. Shahir was a vampire sorcerer who lived in the crypts of Dordryan, located in the Dagger Hills. Shahir had thick black hair, along with a well-maintained beard and mustache. Although he appeared somewhat gaunt, he was considered notably handsome, with skin that had an almost beige hue. He was dressed in ancient, elegant clothing, wearing fine silken robes embroidered with gold thread and fastened with gem-studded buttons down the front. In addition to the typical abilities of a vampire, he combined his vampiric powers with sorcery, allowing him to catch intruders off guard. He frequently turned invisible and left his coffin in a gaseous form, remaining undetected before attacking his enemies with powerful lightning bolts. Over the years, Shahir preyed on tomb robbers and accumulated substantial hoards of silver, gold coins, and even emeralds. He kept this treasure in his wife's empty coffin. Shahir also carried several magical items, including a wand of magic missiles, a ring of protection, a cloak of resistance, and bracers of armor. Shahir had been married to another vampire, but she was destroyed in Daggerdale before 1372. He came from an ancient, little-known noble family and had some connection to the vampires that plagued Daggerdale in 796. He and his wife were interred together in a mausoleum within the Dordryan crypts, where Shahir spent years preying on travelers. After his wife's destruction, by 1372, he lived in the crypt alongside two tomb robbers who he had turned into vampire spawn. Nosferatu was a vampire from Zakhara who became trapped in a shipwreck near the Blade Cliffs south of Lizard Marsh around 1372. He spoke with a thick Madani accent and wore traditional Zakharan attire reflecting his origins. He presented himself as a professional assassin, claiming that he only killed those who posed a threat to his employer. He insisted that he never spilled the blood of innocents, with the only payment for his dark deeds being the blood of his victims. Despite swearing oaths to achieve his goals, Nosferatu never intended to keep them, as he believed such promises only bound humans and not the undead like himself. His history was one of treachery and betrayal. He worked as an assassin for the Zakharan Sultan, successfully eliminating rival nobles. However, after some time on the job, the Sultan sought to depose of Nosferatu to prevent any potential leaks of incriminating information. The vampire was given a ship and crew in order to leave Zakhara for good. While sailing towards the Sword Coast, the ship was wrecked in a storm off the Blade Cliffs. He survived due to his undead nature, but all of his crew perished. He claimed that the bodies were dragged away by wolves, leaving him alone in the wreckage. After the storm, a passing cleric discovered Nosferatu and used a ritual to trap him inside the shipwreck, where he remained for years. In 1372, a group of adventurers investigating the Centauran plot near Daggerford stumbled upon the shipwreck. Inside, they found Nosferatu, who was desperate for release. He begged them to free him from his mystical prison, swearing an oath not to harm them in exchange for precious Zakharan trinkets. The blood-curdling Scream was a rock-gnome vampire illusionist and priest of Erdlin in the 14th century. He led a brutal group known as the Blood Screamers, a pack of dire weremole gnomes. His savage group made their home in the bandit wastes of La Palia, where they launched raids across a vast area. Their attacks stretched from the Nothagal Mountains all the way to Noth and Halarua and the Rathgaunt Hills at the end of the Chonath Vale in the Shar. Caresta Delvingstone is the leading cleric of Shar in Undermountain as of the early 1490s. Once an outlaw on the streets of Waterdeep, Caresta sought fortune and became an adventurer. Her journey into Undermountain took a dark turn when she was transformed into a vampire spawn by a vampire lord. Her fate shifted when Von Rock Moonstar destroyed her master, claiming the vampire's lair for Shar. Grateful, Caresta quickly embraced worship of the goddess of the night, becoming one of Von Rock's key lieutenants. When Von Rock eventually redeemed himself, Caresta took over as the primary leader of the Dark Army of the Night. By 1492, she's actively planning an assault either on the Spires of the Morning or the House of the Moon. In addition to her larger plans, she is also plotting the assassination of key clerics and paladins of Selûne and Lathander. If she sustains any injury, she transforms into a mist and retreats to the safety of her amethyst coffin. She's known to be occupied with the testing of her human cultists, deciding whether to turn them into vampire spawn or send a swarm of rats to consume them. As a devoted follower of Shar, she is deeply committed to avenging Von Rock's downfall. Her fanaticism drives her actions, and she is ruthless in her efforts to serve her goddess. She commands a group of cultists, most of whom are vampire spawn under her control. She is also enthralled an adventurer named Portia Zuth and is typically accompanied by her loyal Yeti bodyguard Thagor. Cyronius Dethic was a pale-skinned drow priest of Vayrun who became a vampire. Despite his transformation into undeath, he remained a devoted servant of Vayrun, the protector of male drow, and the deity of secrecy and evil works on the surface of Toril. Cyronius openly admitted to being thoroughly evil even before his transformation into a vampire. His malevolent nature only deepened with his new existence. In the distant past, he was married, although by the year of wild magic, he believed his wife had long since passed away. Among his possessions, Cyronius kept his wedding ring, which held significant enchantments. The ring had the power to break his curse, provided he could find a bride, whether willing or unwilling. He possessed a unique and legendary magic staff called the Staff of Konash. During a mission on the surface of Faerun, Cyronius Dethic was captured by the warrior wizard Sundar Haliand Liam. Sundar imprisoned him in the dungeons beneath his stronghold, drained him of blood, and forced him to ingest a cursed substance that transformed him into a vampire. The only way to break the curse was for Cyronius' wife to free him. By 1372, Sundar had long since died, and the settlement of Liam's Hold had been built over the ruins of the former stronghold. Cyronius began stalking the inhabitants of the hamlet, seeking a suitable new bride to kill and raise from the dead in hopes of finally breaking his curse. His first target was frightened away by her daughter, a young sorceress. Eventually, Cyronius captured Zonda Pennywell, a weaver from Liam's Hold. Sangora is an ancient vampire merchant who resides in the Shadowfell city of Evernight. She has a distinctive appearance, with long, messy white hair, sunken eyes, and sharp fangs. Her personality is marked by a love for gossip and conversation, particularly with new visitors from the material plane. She is quick to spot potential customers, eagerly spreading her cloak and calling out to offer goods. She delights in exchanging information and is known to engage in detailed questioning of those she meets, always curious about the latest news from beyond Evernight. Sangora runs a business called Sangora Sanguinaries, located in the Corpse Market. There she sells warm blood to other undead and occasionally dabbles in the sale of information. For a high price in gold or in exchange for answers to her own questions, she shares her vast knowledge about Evernight, including its history and mysterious locations like the crevices of dusk. She has 4 vampire spawn assistants who help her in her business endeavors, although they are known to sometimes act against her wishes when they think she won't find out. Despite this, she seems to still trust them. As of 1490, she is known to still be active in Evernight, and she has not returned to Neverwinter in over a decade. Sanjos Iridan is a vampire necromancer and surgeon operating in the Shadowfell city of Evernight as of the late 15th century. He is known for selling undead grafts at the corpse market. Sanjos is described as both evil and insane, qualities that influence his work. He specializes in selling and attaching body parts, including limbs and organs that were magically animated. These parts are harvested from undead creatures, often unwillingly, and need to be carefully extracted without damage. For an additional fee, Sanjos will personally graft these body parts onto his clients through a complex and disturbing ritual, one that only the most desperate or deranged individuals would agree to undergo. By 1479, Sanjos was the most renowned purveyor of undead grafts at the corpse market. His banner proudly displayed his morbid slogan, which reads, "An arm for a leg for less than an arm and a leg." Tebren Dialil, known as the Shadow Stalker, was a vampire and member of the Night Masters. Tebren's appearance reflected his mixed heritage. While his skin was lighter than that of most drow, it still hinted at his origins. His white hair is characteristic of the drow, but his striking blue eyes are inherited from a human parent. Born into slavery in the drow city of Shindil Rin, located in the Underdark, Tebren endured a harsh existence. His chance for freedom came when a Dwergar army from the Underspires attacked the mining outpost where he was forced to work. During the chaos, Tebren managed to kill his captors and escape. Eventually, he was able to surface in the tunnels beneath Westgate and begin a new life as a thief. Tebren accidentally stumbled upon the lair of the Night Masters and stole several items. When Orbach and Dahlia Vamos discovered the theft, they quickly apprehended him. Tebren became Orbach's last vampire slave and the final victim of the Winged Teeth artifact. Due to his talents and vampiric abilities, Tebren was deemed the perfect candidate to lead the guild's thieves. With his magic and vampiric powers, he moved his way through the streets of Westgate unnoticed. Tebren thrived in his new life, reveling in the power it brought him. Many of the lower-ranking members of the guild suspected him to be the elusive figure known as the Faceless. After the Night Masks were destroyed, Tebren sought refuge with the Centarum. However, Orbach eventually ordered him to return to Westgate. Adopting the name Kirin Kiri Salai, Tebren infiltrated the Nine Golden Swords, a show thieves guild, and rose to become one of their leaders. Around 1475, under Tebren's leadership, the Nine Golden Swords waged a war against the Fire Knives, significantly weakening both's power. On Orbach's orders, Tebren re-established the Night Mask's control over Westgate, positioning himself as the new leader of the guild. In the following years, Tebren, now known as Kire, became obsessed with a young mage named Mirren Darkdance. He orchestrated a bounty for her capture in Luskan. By 1480, Kire had enlisted the help of Valis, a young paladin of Hoar and a claimant of the Shadowbane title, as well as Hessar, a member of the Eye of Justice, to further his plans. Mordoc Celan Mere, known as the Pale Knight or the White Prince, claimed the title of first and most powerful vampire king in all of Toril. He was a disciple of Eldrith the Betrayer, although his loyalty to her was limited. He provided her with slaves and fighters, but his ambitions extended far beyond serving her. Mordoc was also a skilled alchemist, adding to his already formidable abilities as a vampire king. He led his army of vampires, nightwalkers, and nightshades in the Battle of the Bones, where they thrived. He established the Keep of Pale Night at the edge of the battlefield, where he and his vampire servants lived. At one point, the assassin Karne was sent to kill him, but Mordoc defeated him in battle. Karne, however, faked his death and continued to plot against him. Although Mordoc pledged allegiance to Eldrith, his true masters resided in Mulhorand, and his ultimate goal was to destroy the city of Baldur's Gate. He supported Eldrith by providing troops for the Dark Alliance. However, a member of Xantham's Thieves Guild, posing as a servant of Eldrith, tricked Mordoc into creating the Orb of the Undead. This powerful artifact was used to animate dead in the crypts of Ilmater in Baldur's Gate. After Vaughn, Crumlech, and Adriana killed Eldrith and escaped the Onyx Tower, Mordoc seized control of it. He planned to move the tower to Baldur's Gate to further his goal of destroying the city. The Harpers tried to stop him by activating the elemental foundations of the tower, hoping to seal it. However, Mordoc gained control of the tower, setting the stage for a final confrontation. Karne, with the help of several fellow adventurers, infiltrated Mordoc's keep of the Pale Knight. They freed Vaughn and several others, and together the 8 adventurers fought against Mordoc's undead forces and bested him in battle. Weakened, Mordoc fled but moved the Onyx Tower to Baldur's Gate. Once in Baldur's Gate, he used the Onyx Heart to transform the city's citizens into zombies, while his vampires turned others into undead. Mordoc renamed the city Mordoc's Gate and added an entrance to the Onyx Tower for his allies from Mulhorand. A month later, the adventurers caught up with the vampire and turned the tide of the battle. In the final confrontation, they advanced to the Onyx Tower, eventually reaching the Plane of Shadow. There they faced Mordoc, who had become nearly godlike in his power. Despite his immense strength, the adventurers managed to defeat him. Rather than claim control of the Onyx Tower, they chose to destroy the Onyx Heart, which shattered the elemental foundations and restored Baldur's Gate, ending Mordok's reign. Tekeli Li was a Gnoll vampire and former Fang of Yinogu who roamed Icewind Dale during the 14th and 15th centuries. As a mortal Gnoll, Tekeli Li led his pack through the harsh frozen lands. In 1333, the year of the Striking Falcon, his pack was defeated by the Reged men barbarians. Desperate for survival, the Gnolls fled across the Reged Glacier, but one by one they sacrificed themselves to Tekeli Li, who ate them, allowing him to survive the winter. Tekeli Li's insatiable hunger caught the attention of Auril, the goddess of winter, who saw his endless consumption as a reflection of the brutal, devouring nature of winter itself. As a punishment, or perhaps a dark form of preservation, Auril trapped Tekeli Li within the caves of hunger, encasing the vampiric Gnoll in the ice of the Reged Glacier. He remained imprisoned there for over a century until a group of adventurers inadvertently reopened the passageway, which freed him once more. Morg is a vampiric hill giant shaman dedicated to the deity Grellantor. He is a massive, muscle-bound figure with vacant, gray-looking eyes and enormous fangs. Despite his brutish heritage, Morg was unusually handsome for a hill giant. He typically wore foul-smelling bear hides and a belt made from the mummified heads of his victims, along with the holy symbol of Grellantor around his neck. When Morg transformed into his owl form, he was also enormous. In contrast to most hill giants, Morg was surprisingly polite and personable. However, his cruelty still shone through in his actions, as he found great joy in draining the life from his victims and discarding their bodies' worthless remains. Devoted to Grellantor, he killed and destroyed in his deity's name. When hunting, he would often lure his prey's allies back to his lair and then ambush and kill them as well. He shared many of the traits of typical vampires, although he lacked the ability to assume a gaseous form and did not regenerate wounds in the typical way. Instead, he healed by transforming into one of his animal forms, either a giant owl or a giant cave bear. Morg's early life was marked by exile from his hill giant tribe due to his appearance and lack of deformities. He wandered the Crypt Garden Forest for several years, joining the Lost Thafinga tribe of hobgoblins as a mercenary. The hobgoblins sought to conquer South Crypt Garden, an abandoned dwarfhold, but the monsters there overwhelmed them. When the hobgoblins fled, they left Morg behind to die. Desperate, Morg prayed to Grellantor for strength to survive, but he was unaware that it was another force that answered his plea. He was transformed into a vampire, and the monsters of the South Crypt Garden now served him. Convinced that his god had saved him, Morg dedicated his life to Grellantor's service and continued to receive his shamanistic powers. After his transformation, Morg returned to his former tribe, hunting them down until half were dead and forced the rest to flee. He turned 3 of the giants who had advocated for his exile into vampiric thralls. Seeking revenge on the hobgoblins who had abandoned him, Morg confronted their shaman. The shaman, forewarned by Maglubiet, negotiated an agreement with which the hobgoblins would provide guards for Morg's lair and bring him victims to feed on. Morg agreed, but warned that failure would result in the slaughter of their entire tribe. After that, Morg made his home in the lowest levels of the South Crypt Garden, venturing out about twice a month to hunt in the surrounding countryside in the Sword Mountains. His reputation as a vengeful force grew as he continued to serve Grellantor and feed his vampiric hunger, although his ultimate fate is unknown. Thibbledorf Gwent leads the Gutbusters of Mithril Hall. He is recognized for wearing intimidating spiked armor and for never bathing. His stench is so overpowering that even fellow dwarves avoid standing near him. On occasion, Caddy Bree affectionately patted his head and ended up with a layer of foul grime on her hand. Gwent is a dwarf with a strong personality, respected by many of his peers. When he first arrived at Mithril Hall, he was a constant nuisance to King Bruenor Battlehammer and others. His loud, abrasive nature and refusal to bathe made him difficult to be around. However, his unwavering loyalty to King Bruenor and the clan earned him his place in Clan Battlehammer through numerous battles. Gwent also had a fierce enthusiasm for combat. He once asked the werewolf Bitterdew Harpel to bite him, hoping to become a werewolf himself, believing it would make him even more formidable in battle. And, he said, as a bonus, hairier. Bitterdew wisely declined. Gwent was present during the initial siege of Mithril Hall by the Dwergar and Shimmergloom. When the hall was reclaimed, he returned to pledge his loyalty. Soon after his return, Gwent valiantly defended Mithril Hall against a drow raiding party, but was eventually incapacitated by Vierna's snake-headed whip. In 1370, he played a crucial role in defending the city once again. He and the Gutbusters helped cover the dwarves' retreat, during which Gwent rescued the gravely injured King Bruenor. Gwent was among the select few dwarves chosen by Bruenor to form an elite group with the goal of infiltrating the orc army and killing Obold Many-Arrows, hoping to break the orc siege of Mithril Hall. Later that year, Gwent left Mithril Hall to discover the bodies of his fallen comrades from the last battle, honoring a promise he made to the father of one of its recruits. In 1462, he set out with Bruenor and Drizzt Do'Urden on a mission to find Gauntlgrim. However, due to his weakened knees from years of battle raging, he stayed behind in Icewind Dale. Eventually, he came to the group's aid inside Gauntlgrim after the ghosts of the ancient dwarves called upon Clan Battlehammer for assistance. In a crucial moment, he dragged Bruenor to the lever that sealed the fire primordial with a cage of water elementals. During the battle, Dor Krye, a vampire, slit Gwent's throat, leading Drizzt to believe that he had died. It was later revealed that Gwent had not truly died, but had been turned into a vampire. Rising from his grave in Gauntlgrim, he began hunting and feeding on goblins and other creatures, although he feared what he had become. After a conversation with Drizzt in 1463, Gwent planned to end his life by waiting for the sunrise, but ultimately didn't follow through with it. When Bruenor returned to Gauntlgrim to retrieve his axe, he discovered that Gwent fled into the caves and was now leading an undead band of drow. Determined to save his old friend, Bruenor vowed to free Gwent from the curse of vampirism. By 1484, Gwent had declared himself the steward of Gauntlgrim and controlled several drow vampire minions, periodically launching attacks on the drow of Khazor Larin. Catti-brie eventually captured Gwent in Wulfgar's magical horn, replacing the 10 berserkers that were previously summoned by it. They took the horn to Longsaddle, where Gwent was resurrected and cleansed of his curse. He died and was buried there. However, his essence as a berserker remained in the horn, allowing him to be summoned when it was blown, shouting, "Me king!" For this reason, the horn stayed with Bruenor. Although Gwent was physically resurrected, his vampire form was not completely destroyed and remained in his tomb in Gauntlgrim. By 1488, during the battles against the demons of House Millarn, he witnessed a huge number of drow traveling from Menzoberranzan to Gauntlgrim. Struggling to resist the vampire curse, Gwent came dangerously close to giving in to the urge to drink blood and form a vampiric clan of dwarves. Despite his internal battle, he remained loyal to King Bruenor and guided Yvonel II to confront the incoming forces from House Bainray. When Yvonel II and Quenthal Bainray created a powerful enchanted web that lifted the Dryder's curse of abomination, Gwent also leapt into the magical webbing and was completely cured of his vampiric curse. Although the intensity of the cure left him near death, Artemis Entreri carried him back to Gauntlgrim and saved his life. The only lingering effect of his curse was that he still retained the fangs of a vampire. Like the other members of the Gutbusters, Gwent carried a flask of the Gutbuster drink, which was known to combat most poisons and likely has anesthetic properties. Capno Lithel, also known as Brimstone, is a vampiric smoke drake and a hero of the last rage of dragons. He appears to be a typical smoke drake with black-reddish scales. However, this appearance is merely an illusion that conceals his true, undead vampiric nature. He can also transform into a cloud of embers and smoke at will. He considers himself a skilled scryer, with spells that allow him to communicate with others over great distances. He possesses at least one spell that can fire darts of flame, and knows a charm to enhance his own speed. He possessed a magical collar that allowed him to remain away from his horde, unlike other vampire dragons who were bound to theirs by long periods. During the final battle against the Lich Samester, in which Capno Lithel participated, he managed to destroy the collar. However, a small fragment of it remained, which he held within his body to keep it safe. Capno Lithel was one of the Drake Sammaster approached during his research on creating the first Draco Liches. He allowed Sammaster to turn him into a vampire, believing this would secure him favor and a place of power in the world Sammaster envisioned. However, Sammaster soon realized that vampires had too many limitations and discarded Capno Lithel. From that moment onward, his sole purpose was to see Sammaster destroyed. To that end, Capno Lithel remained in his lair near Lyrabar, quietly massing power. In 1373, he learned about Kara Sandreath's quest to cure the Rage of Dragons and reached out to offer his assistance. He later traveled with Kara, Dorn Greybrook, and some other companions on a quest to uncover Sammaster's secrets. During his travels, Capno Lithel had a difficult relationship with the cleric Pavel Shemov, a priest of Lathander who struggled to accept Capno Lithel's undead nature. He achieved several notable accomplishments, including turning back the Vasan horde, which had been stirred by Sammaster to create chaos. He also saved Gareth Dragonsbane, the king of Damara, and played a vital role in the final battle against Sammaster, helping to destroy the Mythal that caused the Rage of Dragons. Because of these deeds, dragons across Faerun hail him as a hero, although some believe he perished in that final confrontation. After Sammaster's destruction, Capno Lithel experienced a deep sense of emptiness. He remained in Sammaster's fortress, the citadel where the final battle took place, searching for a new purpose. His search led him to uncover an ancient draconic custom called the Zorban Tal. Intrigued, he traveled across the Outer Plains to discover it fully. He returned to Toril in 1479 and went to Dracoweir to contact the princes of Morgom, seeking to establish his own Zorban Tal. The princes allowed him to connect with many other chromatic dragons, as well as a few gem and metallic dragons to begin the game. To ensure their participation, Captain Olithel bound the dragons with a powerful spell, although they remained unaware of it. After T'Chazar was freed from Selrigoth's prison, Captain Olithel sought him out to invite the Red Dragon to join the Zorban Tal as well. When several of the dragons involved in the game discovered plans by the Brotherhood of the Griffins to sabotage it, Captain Olithel rallied the dragons to strike against them. Following the Battle of Luthchek, the leaders of the Brotherhood of the Griffin, alongside dragons and dragonborn knights from Timanther, traveled to Dracoweir to confront Captain Olithel. They forced him to break the spell that bound the dragons to the game. Before vanishing to an unknown location, Captain Olithel revealed that the Zorban Tal was merely a ploy to eliminate the most powerful dragons around the Sea of Fallen Stars. Perhaps the most well-known vampire in Faerun, Artor Morlin is known as the Baron of Blood and the vampire lord who sees Waterdeep as his own personal hunting grounds. He brooks no challenges from rival vampires to his domain. As an immortal creature living in the same place for over 4 centuries, Artor has created several personalities for himself to remain incognito. However, he lacks imagination, and every one of his personae is a mercenary captain. Artor is a wary individual who tries to observe his foes and sends his vampire spawn or other minions to deal with threats instead of confronting them himself. He prefers to avoid notice wherever possible and maintain his public identity so that he can spend his free time hunting. After being expelled from the dungeon of the Crypt, Artor has spent decades anxiously waiting and watching for signs that people have forgotten about the existence of the dungeon and that he is still out there. He is known to spend a small fortune on blood rot to suggest an addiction to the drug. This ploy aims to create a weakness that enemies would think to exploit, revealing themselves in the process. The strategy has proven successful in drawing out several of his enemies. Artor is a pragmatic tactician and strategist who is determined to never lose a fight. He refuses to put himself in a situation where there's any doubt about his absolute victory. To cover all bases, he spends years researching the inherent weaknesses of being a vampire, just so that he can exploit them if an opponent tries to use one against him. However, when Artor finds himself in a situation that requires drawing sword and entering combat, his bloodlust takes over, and he revels in the chaos and bloodshed. Artor doesn't maintain many relationships, considering his centuries-long lifespan. Instead, he prefers to kill off old allies and form new ones, rather than keeping them around for too long. He does have a coterie of vampire spawn, including several adventurers, and Medekai the Medusa, who is his favorite. Artor has made acquaintances over the years, such as Hallister Blackcloak, but true friends are scarce. One notable exception is Durnan, who he shares a close bond with. He has connections to several syndicates across Faerun, including the Shadow Thieves. He's also been closely tied to the Ghost family in Waterdeep for centuries. In recent times, Jarrus Ghost was his dominated puppet, a secret that would have shocked Jarrus' vampire-hunting half-sister had she discovered it. Artor also maintains dominated servants connected to the Church of Lathander. These informants provide information about rival vampires, which are then destroyed by church-sponsored vampire hunters. The first recorded evidence of Morlin places him as a loyal mercenary guard in Kisar Shun III's court at Shunok. Despite being aware of the Kisar's younger brother plotting against him, Artor was too late to save his life during the coup that took place in 130. Artor became an infamous outlaw among the Shuns and worked as a mercenary from the 2nd to the 10th century. He is known to have a hatred of all things Kalashite, which leads him to harass Kalashite trade caravans. He built Morlin Castle on what is now the site of Daggerford, and proclaimed himself Baron of the Steeping Falls and Lord Protector of the Sword Hills in 133. At some point he fell prey to evil and became a powerful vampire. He continued to harass Kalashite caravans in the south, seemingly uncaring that his realm disintegrated around 403. His castle fell into ruins during the Second Troll War, around the time he disappeared. However, when he heard about Castle Daggerford being built on top of the ruins of his home, he returned and moved his coffin to Waterdeep, ignoring the development of Daggerford in favor of the new settlement. Artor was the first vampire to settle in Waterdeep and built the Dungeon of the Crypt just north of the City of the Dead. In 1035, he made a deal with Open Lord Agarion, promising to keep Waterdeep free from other vampires except himself. In exchange, he would have a say in how the city was ruled, earning him a place as one of the masked lords of the city. Later, in 1131, the year of the Seven Kings Horde, Artor found himself battling an undead horde in the Fields of the Dead near Baldur's Gate. Artor dwelt in the dungeon of the crypt for around 4 centuries, keeping Waterdeep citizens safe from other vampires as per his agreement. However, in 1341, the year of the Gate, the company of crazed venturers defeated him and forced Artor to retreat to the fireplace level. After a decade passed, he had one of his vampire servants move back into his old lair to test whether people would remember that he was never destroyed. Every 5 years, he would kill the servant, create another, and send them to perform the same task. The fourth such servant, Fang, was intended to be the last imposter before Artor returned in person. However, in 1374, a vampire from Undermountain named Dusara el Abuk challenged Artor for control of Waterdeep. Unbeknownst to her, this challenge invoked the divine interdiction of a Malorite high hunt, trapping herself and Artor within the city. When Dusara realized her mistake, she managed to get another group of powerful adventurers involved to hunt down Artor on her behalf. After this encounter with the adventurers, he chose to leave behind his old hideouts and settle in the crypts beneath the Ghost Mausoleum in the City of the Dead. Another century passed, and in 1492, Jarlaxle, the leader of Bregan Derthe, discovered another powerful potential rival in the Ghost Crypts. Rather than waste resources trying to eliminate the rival himself, Jarlaxle created and distributed several fake treasure maps leading to the mausoleum. His plan was to have other treasure hunters and adventurers deal with the rival for him. Artor eventually decided to let one of the groups that came in after him live, provided they stopped the spread of the fake maps. He allowed them to leave with the knowledge of his undead state, confident he could kill them if they ever betrayed him. While these agents succeeded in halting the distribution, enough maps remained in circulation around the city, forcing Artor to seek out yet a new lair. The existence of a vampire is a perpetual struggle between the remnants of their former selves and the insatiable darkness that now consumes them. Vampires retain the skills and abilities they possessed in life, augmented by formidable powers that make them both awe-inspiring and terrifying. However, these gifts come at the cost of their humanity and the twisting of their deepest desires into sinister obsessions. Being a vampire is not merely about wielding dark powers or commanding undead thralls. It is a cursed state that erodes one's soul. Unless this creature is capable of hanging on to a good nature they possessed in life, past affections will become dangerous fixations, and virtues will transform into vices. The eternal life they gain is shadowed by the vulnerabilities they can never escape: sunlight that burns them, running water that harms them, and the sacred thresholds they cannot cross. In their myriad forms, vampires stalk ancient tombs, manage criminal syndicates, and even rule kingdoms. Their lack of mortality and natural abilities to persuade, influence, and even enslave mortal beings enables them to become influential figures or local terrors. Yet a more careful examination of vampires throughout the history of Toril reveals a more complex relationship between these individuals and their curse. Some choose it willingly, seeking more power and fearing death. Others were victims, seeking to overcome their fate. Those motivated by powerful emotions, such as loyalty and love, appear capable of overcoming whatever evil forces motivate most vampires. The amount of influence the personal psychology of an individual can play in their ultimate fate as a vampire makes this condition one of the most intriguing in all of the Forgotten Realms. The wind doth blow today, my love, and a few small drops of rain. I never had but one true love, in a cold grave she was lain. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn upon her grave for a 12-month and a day. The 12-month and a day had passed, the dead began to speak. Who sits there weeping on my grave, and will not let me sleep? 'Tis I, my own true love, that sits upon your grave. For I want one kiss of your clay-cold lips, and that is all I crave. You crave one kiss of my clay-cold lips, but my breath smells earthy strong. If you have one kiss of my clay-cold lips, your time will not be long. 'Tis down in yonder garden green, love, where we used to walk. The finest flower that e'er was seen has withered to a stalk. The stalk is withered dry, my love, so will our hearts decay. So make yourself content, my love, till the gods call you away.